Welcome to Whisperer of Madness. If you're enjoying the story, consider liking the video and subscribing. It really helps grow the channel and this community. Timely appearance, a wild blaze surged up as corrosive artillery shells created a blanket of lightning across the sky. The glows of numerous attacking spells revolved around the Ouroboros clan headquarters, unfolding in layers continuously at the phosphorescent swamp. In order to protect their organization and their homeland, the formidable warlocks went all out against their equally powerful opponents. The earth was stained with blood and bones. Outside headquarters, two behemoths roared ferociously in their entanglement. Every strike sent tremors through the land, as if forming an unending earthquake. This sort of remarkable battle was uncommon even in the central continent, and deserved to be recorded as a legendary one. The intense confrontation had lasted a full day, yet not the creatures, nor the Magi nor the Warlocks showed traces of backing down. The Magi could bear the intensity of the battle, and the two giant creatures could do it even more easily. On the other hand, Faisal wore a displeased look from within the command room. The east zone is 37% damaged, the city walls 55%. The energy consumed by the Dew Serpent Annihilator is too large. 67% of our combined storage is already depleted. We can't keep going much longer. How could there not be a price be paid for them to maintain a Morningstar realm combat strength? The Kayasha beast depended on a frightening amount of food as sustenance. On the other hand, the warlocks of the Ouroboros clan could only use the stored energy from the multiple Magus towers to power the Dew Serpent Annihilator. Faisal understood that a puppet would always remain a puppet. Once the energy supply was terminated, the Dew Serpent Annihilator would revert back to its original form. The remaining energy was insufficient for them to continue holding the fort. If this went on with the exhaustion of their trump card, the Ouroboros clan looked to be set for extermination. "Mentor, please come back as soon as you can." It didn't matter what Faisal thought previously. His pleas now were extremely sincere. For the family, for the bloodline, for the glory of our warlocks. At the battlefield at the West Zone, Freya was covered in blood from head to toe, multiple cuts all across her body. Yet she fought on through sheer force of will and obstinance, directly blocking the demon Magus ahead of her. "Admit your defeat. You no longer have the protection of your Morning Star Magi. You are destined to fall." The demon Magus chief was out of breath as he spoke sentimentally. "There are few Magi who can sustain battle with me for over 30 hours. Looking around at the messy battlefield filled with corpses of bloodline warlocks, Freya shut her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, they glowed with ferocity. "I vow not to yield. The glory of the bloodline warlocks cannot perish in my hands." "What a foolish decision," the chief chided. "If it is so, I will not show any mercy." As if a seal had been unlocked, the iron chain on his right hand cracked apart, snapping off and dropping down in segments. Dark black flames rose continuously from the arm, and Freya's previous sense of danger had increased tenfold. "This demon's arm is a precious treasure that I acquired after braving countless dangers." A terrifying arm, completely coated with scales and tipped with sharp claws, was revealed as the chain broke. Compared to the transformation of the other members of the demon Magus army, the horror that this arm exuded was far more terrifying. This could be considered a true demon's arm. "The crystal phase Magi that have fallen to this arm number 7. Today you shall be the 8th, the chief roared, swinging his arm towards the front. A frightening black blaze erupted, barricading the whole area like a cage. With the allied army winning, a loud hump sounded, audible to the entire region. A Magus appeared in the middle of the battlefield, with eyes of silver and brows as sharp as swords and a Magus robe, decorated with the images of tortured demons, draped over his body. Although he just stood silently in empty space, his presence generated a strong domain that had the whole Ouroboros clan headquarters engulfed. In but a moment, the chaos of the battlefield had died down, giving birth to a deathly silence. Even the Kayasha beast and Duo Serpent Annihilator had stopped in the middle of their intense battle. They felt a huge, imminent threat from this tiny human body. "It's Demon Hunter Cyril. Why did he show himself in advance?" The red-haired female Magus asked in disbelief. "Cyril, it's said that you're a person who doesn't bother with reputation." The green-haired Magus looked unimpressed. "Seeing the positive circumstances on our side, you must have rushed here to forcibly take credit for it." He's an exalted morning star Magus. Why would he snatch anything from you? The female Magus covered her mouth and sniggered. He. Cyril's reputation amongst morning star magi. You will find out soon enough. The male Magus smiled bitterly. In the world of morning star magi, everyone knew that demon hunter Cyril lacked all form of chivalry. He was overbearing and shameless, seizing the resources and treasures of lower-ranked magi. Are you not going to act anymore? Me? How can I interfere? The male Magus spread out his hand and gestured. Everyone clearly has made some deals with the demon hunter. In front of a morning star Magus, I am but a slightly bigger ant, no more than that. Thereafter, he laughed at himself and continued. No matter what, with the addition of the demon hunter, this battle will end soon. On the battlefield, the warlocks who had yet to reach the hydro phase were confined by the enormous pressure, and even moving seemed to be difficult. Even rank 3 crystal phase nobles were helpless as they realized that their ability to gather elemental particles had been halved. Even activating their spiritual force proved to be extremely difficult. Under the effect of the domain of a morning star Magus, all lower-ranked magi were like ants. It's over! It's all over! Faisal slid to the ground, witnessing the ruthless massacre of the warlocks. His expression turned deathly pale as he felt the life draining out from him. With the support of the domain of the demon hunter, the allied military immediately stomped out many regions of defense, even as the last bit of the defensive barrier was destroyed. At the center of it all, Cyril sneered in midair. A projection of huge sharp claws appeared, and it reached out and attacked the source of energy at the city's center. Poe! A colorful barrier appeared, blocking the sharp claws. Then, both the barrier and the claw in an instant before turning into ashes, disappearing into the emptiness. A rather good item. Pity that it could only block one attack at the Morning Star realm. Cyril laughed heartily, his body's radiance growing brighter. Horrifying amounts of elemental particles coagulated once again, as if a tsunami had crashed into the bright barrier. The membrane cracked, and the energy source was extinguished. The huge defensive spell formation supporting the whole city had been under the attack of the army for an entire day. The combined Magus towers, as well as the various spell formations, collapsed loudly. Like a screen of water being dispersed, the membrane disappeared, and the entirety of the Ouroboros clan headquarters grew visible to the enemy. No! 2 rolls of tears streaked down Lucian's face as he cried out. An enormous carnivorous flower that was almost 10 meters high devoured him completely. Even though he'd suppressed the other party with all his might, after being weakened by the Morning Star domain, he could only await his death. Is this it? Freya's jaws were clenched hard. She knew she wasn't a match for her opponent. Under the attacks of the demon's arm, she now cut an extremely sorry figure, collapsing on the ground after sustaining heavy injuries from the domain. Seeing the sharp claw advancing towards her and the cold, ruthless eyes of the demon Magus who owned it, Freya was dazzled. In the blink of an eye, time seemed to slow to a crawl. Her life flashed in front of her eyes as if she was reading a picture book, flipping page to page. In the end, her thoughts drifted to a young, black-robed warlock. He smiled warmly at her, the passion in his eyes enough to send the hearts of all female warlocks fluttering. They would be attracted to him like a moth to the flame. Regardless of the danger of the blaze, regardless, that attraction would end up fatal. Goodbye, Leyland. A single sparkling tear slipped out of the corner of her eyes. The sharp, scaly claw with its dark flames and terrifying energy brought with an intensely violent wind as it aimed at her body. The demon Magus across her was very confident in his abilities. He could handle a crystal phase Magus that was armed to the teeth easily, forget a warlock who was seriously injured and suppressed. He was even imagining the death of this female warlock in front of him, the blood and internal organs spilling everywhere. However, nothing was set in stone. Suddenly, the chief felt like his hand had been trapped in an iron hoop, rendering him unable to take another step forward. He looked up and was stunned. A warlock wearing a black Magus robe stood in front of him. He had long black hair, an extremely handsome face, and had traces of a demonic charm on him that could attract the attentions of all female warlocks. He seemed to have appeared in a flash. His right hand gripped the demon's arm, and the other radiated a black serpent-shaped airflow which held Freya in place. Freya's shut eyes popped open, and she saw Leyland. Unable to contain herself, she blurted out, Sir Leyland, am I dreaming? No, you're not dreaming. You've exhausted yourself. Take a rest while I handle everything else. Leyland's bright smile was soothing, and it put Freya's heart to rest. Drowsy, she fell asleep. "Who are you?" The chief was shocked beyond words. For someone to be able to remain calm under the Morning Star domain and even cause the chief himself to be helpless, this person must not be easy to deal with. Besides, he couldn't even see through the opposing party's energy. The feeling was as if the demon Magus shook his head, forcing his mind to abandon such thoughts as he didn't want to frighten himself. He was afraid he might lose all confidence, kneeling and asking for mercy if his train of thoughts was to develop further. Bloodline ignition * boom. Dark black flames exploded forth from the demon's arm along with sharp knife-like blades. It was obvious that the demon Magus chief had definitely used everything he had up his sleeves for this attack. Unfortunately, be it the flames or the blades, they couldn't even leave a scratch on Leyland's pure white palms. The flame was even extinguished moments after it burst forth. "Morning! Morning!" This chief's teeth began chattering. He had a feeling that things were progressing in a bad way. Who knew the entire Alliance army's plan could have been hindered? "Master, save me!" At the edge of life and death, he immediately cried for his master's help. "Looking for him? Too late!" Leyland shook his head, and a black blade of light swept across him. This frightening Magus, who was in the crystal phase and had an unfathomable strength with the addition of his demon's arm, was sliced into two just like that. Be it innate defense or magic equipment, they were all like air in front of the black light blade, posing no resistance at all. Even at the moment of death, the other party's face showed bafflement. Seeing his best subordinate killed, Cyril naturally had a reaction. By the time he understood the situation, an even more horrified expression emerged on his face. "Leyland, it's me!" Leyland handed Freya over to his subordinate's care and floated up to midair. His gaze fixed onto Cyril, showing not a trace of weakness. Boom! As if an ancient beast had awakened, a mysterious yet powerful force field began to emanate from Leyland, rapidly offsetting Cyril's Morning Star domain. To their relief, all the warlocks of the Ouroboros clan felt like a load was being lifted off their backs, immediately restoring their previously sluggish spiritual force to full capacity. "You have already advanced to the Morning Star realm." Cyril managed to squeeze out from the crevices between his clenched teeth. "Of course," Leyland laughed brilliantly. With just those two words of his, everyone on scene was amazed. "A while ago, I've left Parker and Tanasha at Freya's side. There's no need for me to worry." Leyland, wearing a loose black robe, activated the last spell formation. A mechanical door dropped down, along with the activation of multiple layers of seals. Vibrant runes wandered close to one another across the surface of the iron door. Leyland had used every bit of knowledge he had about defensive spell formations in this, and together with the AI chip's deductive capabilities, even a Morning Star Magus would take a while to force his way in. The walls of the secret chamber were littered with aura isolation runes. This room could be said to be one of the best hidden places on the continent right now. There was no choice about it. This matter concerned his advancement to the Morning Star realm, and Leyland wouldn't dare to be sloppy. This was not his manor at the headquarters, but a cellar where he kept his secret purchases. The entire process was controlled by him alone, and to an observer, it would seem completely unrelated to Leyland. In his own manner, he had set up the same defensive spell formation, displaying the facade that he was still there. At such a critical junctures, Leyland was extremely vigilant. He even found it hard to trust some of his subordinates. "As long as we make it through this, everything will be fine and all the future holds for us is boundless open vistas." Leyland sighed softly. As if he released all of his emotions, his eyes became clear and he calmed down. He sat on the ground, and some items emerged in his hands. A milky white finger bone with a few narrow cracks on it, a tube of golden blood emitting terrifying energy waves, as well as a messy pile of spiritual force crystals. These crystals were mostly from his spoils, while a portion of it came from Freya's gifts and his own collection. "The road to the Morning Star is vast and long. Many crystal phase magi do not even have the chance to come into contact with this bottleneck." Leyland held a solemn expression. He had only advanced to the crystal phase not long ago, and he was already thinking of breaking through to Morning Star. If it was an ordinary Magus, it would be nothing but a dream. But he was different. He had a lot of cards in his hand and abundant knowledge, so much so that even some Morning Star magi could only wish for it. Even with just the labia finger bone, warlocks who had been stuck for years would gain the possibility of breaking through. AI chip, report my current condition. Leyland Farlier, rank 3 warlock crystal phase bloodline, giant Chemian serpent strength, 40 agility, 35 vitality, 55 spiritual force, 356.5 magic power, 356 magic power in synchronization with spiritual force. The AI chip replied loyally. After advancing to the crystal phase, his own spiritual force had increased only slightly. It was instead his strength and vitality that had gone a growth spurt under the effect of the techniques of the multi-armed race. Rank 3 spiritual force varies from 200 to 400. The first threshold for advancing to the Morning Star realm is for it to reach a critical value, filling up your entire sea of consciousness. Because the AI chip had already deduced more than half the information about the Morning Star realm, Leyland currently had no doubts as to his path. In fact, this was why he had to wait for the AI chip's deduction progress to reach such a point before he could advance. Many times, the crucial reason for failure in advancing was exactly a lack of knowledge about the path to Morning Star, as well as the handling of the many real-life problems during the promotion. The AI chip's deductions on the Morning Star realm happened to make up for this, clearing any remaining confusions that Leyland had. To a certain extent, he also needed to thank the Azure Mountain King for this. If he had not anxiously sent a clone, the AI chip probably would not have been able to progress in the Morning Star deduction to over 50%. My spiritual force now can only be said to have just reached the crystal phase. It's still far from the critical value. I'll need the help of bloodline ignition. Leyland picked up the test tube, which was filled with golden blood. This was the bloodline of the ancient red dragon, obtained from the kobold warlocks of the Forgotten Land. Although it was extremely pure, because Leyland's own bloodline had long before been fixed, there was no chance to use it. That opportunity would only arise after he completely analyzed the ancient quicksand organization's bloodline experiment results. The bloodline ignition experiment, as its name implies, was conducted by burning various kinds of bloodlines to strengthen one's own power. Its requirements towards the bloodline was very strict. One had to be a warlock in order to conduct it, and the grade of the bloodline that was to be burnt could not be too low. If not, the entire experiment would not succeed and could even backfire. The bloodline of the ancient red dragon fulfilled this requirement perfectly. As for the supplementary resource for the experiment, it was a crystal phase Magus, spiritual force crystals. Only the spiritual force fire produced by such crystals could completely burn the ancient bloodline and convert it into energy that would serve as the driving force for the warlock's advancement. A complicated, detailed spell formation was already drawn on the surface of the ground. Leyland inlaid the many spiritual force crystals one by one in an orderly manner, filling up the spell formation quickly. The spiritual force crystal of a crystal phase Magus was a top-grade resource in many social circles. It could even be used as a currency on its own, and was of high worth. But now, a large amount of spiritual force crystals were laid on the ground as if they were worthless, radiating a pure, sparkling light. The marks of the original owners of these crystals had naturally been erased by Leyland. The ancient red dragon bloodline is preceded only by that of the sun's child. It's an extremely powerful bloodline that can at least reach rank 5. Frankly speaking, if not for the fact that my bloodline cannot be changed once absorbed, I'm afraid I too would not be able to resist the temptation and would convert into a dragon bloodline warlock. Leyland sighed, taking off his Magus robe. He then smeared the golden blood all over his body without missing a spot. The golden blood felt viscous to the touch and smelt like orchids. It was cool to the touch at first, but soon became boiling hot. At the same time, a translucent flame rose from the spell formation below Leyland's body. Streaks of crystal-clear light were pulled out of the many spiritual force crystals like threads. They then converged at a point, forming a translucent flame comprised of spiritual force. Although this flame was not really hot, once it came in contact with the essence of the ancient red dragon's golden bloodline, it sparked a violent reaction. Ow! Leyland groaned. His body grew rigid in a moment, and under the burning of the spiritual force flame, he could feel the strange transformation in the ancient red dragon bloodline. It even turned into a blood-red energy, passing through his pores and making it all the way into his bone marrow. For an ordinary person, Such pain was almost unbearable, but Leyland was just more focused on the AI chip's monitored information. Beep. Large amounts of bloodline essence has been absorbed by host body. Identified as the ancient red dragon's blood, beginning bloodline ignition experiment. The curve of the spiritual force's fire is stabilized, converting the ancient red dragon bloodline into energy. Beep. Bloodline energy absorbed by host body spiritual force increasing. The repeated prompts caused an expression of delight to surface on Leyland's face suddenly. He noticed the initial value of 356 for his spiritual force spiking suddenly, and at the same time, a large amount of blood-red energy was injected into his sea of consciousness, expanding its boundaries continuously. Black spiritual force crystals, faintly hued red, condensed in large quantities. Even if his spiritual force was spiking suddenly, with the amplification of multi-limb strength, Leyland managed to hang on without losing his consciousness. This gave him an opportunity to deepen his understanding of his own body. His spiritual force rocketed up continuously, exceeding 370, then 380. It reached 385 before it began to slow down. Shortly after, the value shot past 390, making it sprint towards 400, the limit of the crystal phase. 395, 396, 397. At this value, it began to slow, with the swift change relegated to decimal places. Pop. At this moment, all of the numerous spiritual force crystals were sucked dry, and the spiritual force flame swelled. With the support of this power, Leyland's spiritual force began to rise again, all the way to 399 before it came to a stop. Morning star, beep. Injected spiritual force reaching critical levels. With his sea of consciousness swelling up, and the reminder from the AI chip, Leyland realized that not only had his spiritual force reached the value of 399, even his sea of consciousness were filled with black, with a tinge of red in the center, spiritual force crystals. Inside his sea of consciousness, the 3 layers of the spiritual force core nucleus started to emit dazzling lights. The results of the first time the bloodline ignition experiment is performed is the best, and they decrease over multiple uses. As he could still feel the strong surge of bloodline energy, Leyland ordered, AI chip, initiate the promotion to Morning Star. Assignment received. Vital signs under observation, initiating Morning Star deduction, starting from the prototype of the point mass. Numerous amounts of data, both numeric and otherwise, relating to the construction of the point mass began streaming in front of Leyland's eyes. If not for the Azure Mountain King's clone, Leyland could never have gotten a hold of all this secret information about the Morning Star realm as easily. Lay me a finger bone. Looking at the other bloodline treasure, he realized that it was actually his biggest gain from Quicksand Castle. If he were to use it then, he could have advanced immediately to the peak of rank 3, skipping the hydro and crystal phases. Yet, Leyland was one who did not give in easily to temptations, forcing himself to control his impulses and merely using the radiation emitted by the finger bone to slowly nurture his bloodline. Even though the Lamia finger bone could help him advance tremendously, but under comparison with the advancement to the Morning Star realm, he knew which one was more important. So what's there left to think about? Pang! The milky white finger bone disintegrated into ashes, and one of the rays of lights that appeared during the explosion pointed directly towards Leyland's forehead. Hong! The Lamia finger bone was absorbed into his body. A terrifying change started to occur immediately. In Leyland's sea of consciousness, under an enormous compressive power, numerous amounts of spiritual force crystals moved towards the center. His face paled under the enormous pressure exerted at the heart of his spiritual force. It was so bad that his whole body started twitching. The sea of consciousness was essentially the home of the soul. The moment that it experienced any damage, the Magus would be in deep trouble. Under the immense pressure that the spiritual force was experiencing, sounds could be heard coming from the center of Leyland's sea of consciousness. It wasn't a good sign. Construct the 4th innate spell, Leyland commanded with red eyes. Beginning assignment. Supplementary work initiated, transferring atomic microscope. The AI chip replied loyally. Leyland's sea of consciousness consisted of 3 layers presently. The outer layer held runes for 2 innate spells, one for Chem-In Scales and the other for the Eye of Petrification. On the layer beneath was the rune for rank 2, Toxic Bile. The innermost layer held rank 3 spiritual force crystals, consisting of his rank 3 innate spell Intimidating Gaze. Under a sudden flash of red light, the 3 layers of runes perfectly combined, forming the exquisite image of a warlock's rune. Yet, it was missing one final thing. At this very moment, a 4th layer of crystals started to appear in the center of the 3rd layer. As the center of the core nucleus had a unique structure, the crystals became smaller as one went closer to the center. But at the same time, the details on each rune became more intricate and they grew much more specialized. At the center of the 4th layer, even though it was a quarter the size of the 1st layer, it was still important that there be no errors when one was carving the rank 4 rune. That was an out-of-the-world request of a Magus, spiritual force manipulation abilities. It's no wonder that most magi fail at advancing to rank 4. Even with the assistance provided by the AI, Chip, this task seems to be too difficult. With the help provided by the AI chip, Leyland, who had already initiated the atomic microscope, had started to carve down the Chem-In's pupil innate spell on the 4th layer with the innate runes he'd recorded. This was something every warlock must choose, and only in high-grade meditation techniques do innate spell models like these exist. The attention to detail required to carve a rune in the sea of consciousness was much greater than carving a statue, and the act was much more difficult. Once Leyland completed the final stroke of the rune, his body almost collapsed due to exhaustion. Under the immense pressure, it seemed like completing the 4th level rune properly was a big challenge. It took a while for Leyland's consciousness to stabilize. Once the innate spell had been completed, his entire sea of consciousness started to tremble. Boundless rays of lights started to radiate from the center of his sea of consciousness. The 4 layers of intricate runes started to bind together in a picturesque order, much like a piece of artwork. Once the centermost part was filled up, the entire crystal started to shake violently, strengthening tremendously within seconds, and the immense pressure that was present previously had disappeared. This rune! Leyland observed the rune that was a combination of all his innate runes. It represented all of his achievements so far, and hence he commanded the AI chip to record it down. Perfection, the first impression this rune would leave on a person was that of perfection. A gigantic rune was created by the combination of these small runes, which circulated continuously and looked pretty much 3D regardless of how one looked at it. It was flawless. "Is this the path of my bloodline?" Leyland mumbled. At this very moment, he was almost moved to tears. Rustle. Once the 4 layers perfectly crystallized, they started to crumble inwards, shrinking to a point that rapidly started revolving. Much like a black hole, it started to suck in everything in its surroundings. The spiritual force crystals inside his sea of consciousness started to shrink as they got sucked into the black hole, initiating the construction of point mass. Guidelines activated. The AI chip reported. Leyland, too, started to construct his personal point mass according to his understanding and the information from his AI chip. Boom! An immense suction force could be felt coming from the mass point of the spiritual force. Not only were the spiritual force crystals sucked in, even the sea of consciousness was broken through, and more energy, flesh, and soul aura were pulled in. Slap! Leyland's consciousness suddenly blurred. Time seemed to pass extremely slowly, and at times it felt like eternity was squeezed into an instant. It took the sounds of glass shattering for Leyland to wake up again. This time, his sea of consciousness felt empty. There was a dim light shining at the center of the core, the result of shrinking the spiritual force 1,000,000 times over such that the nucellus core's density and purity had reached a remarkable level. This was the point mass of a morning star Magus. The source of the light shook, and the purified energy of the morning star realm, the energy of the point mass that was also known as soul force, started to leak out into the entirety of Leyland's body. At that point, he had entered the morning star realm. Beep. Host's Chem-In's pupil meditation technique has advanced to the 4th level. Host has advanced to rank 4. The AI chip sounded out. Host's spiritual force has undergone a qualitative change. Data is inaccurate, recalculating. It was a long time for the new data to go up. Leyland Farlier, rank 4 Warlock bloodline, giant Chem-In serpent, complete form, strength, 50 agility, 45 vitality, 65 spiritual force, 503.7 magic power, 503 magic power in synchronization with spiritual force, soul force. Due to a lack of information about soul force, it is currently not possible to calculate stats. Looking at the AI chip's report, Leyland touched his chin and went into deep thought. After advancing to the morning star realm, the original spiritual force would undergo purification and turn into soul force. This energy was on a whole new level compared to spiritual force. Yet, as the information and data that the AI chip had on soul force was limited, there was too little knowledge in the database to display a value. It could only display numbers in terms of spiritual force. He had to wait until the AI chip had collected sufficient data to thoroughly calculate his soul force statistics. The boundary of the morning star realm is 500. Leyland felt the terror of having such strong energy inside. This is nearly 100 higher than a rank 3's spiritual force value. It is no wonder rank 3 and rank 4 are worlds apart. Soul force! Something came into Leyland's mind, and a gloomy light appeared above his palm. This was the mutated spiritual force from the point mass. It is also an energy of a greater level. All magi at the morning star realm and above used soul force. It was only when one reached this stage that they could find their own path in life. This is why in ancient times, magi below rank 4 weren't even deemed to have entered the world of magi yet. There was a huge difference between rank 3 and rank 4, and the same was true between ranks 6 and 7. Leyland had no idea about what happened when one reached rank 7, but after advancing, he now clearly knew the differences between ranks 3 and 4. Magi at rank 3 and below mainly use spiritual force. However, once that is crossed, the morning star, radiant moon, and breaking dawn magi will have to come in contact with the soul force and pay extra attention to explore the potential in their soul. Leyland couldn't help but look at his own point mass. In the heart of his sea of consciousness, that small glow of light continued to spin around, forming a nebular spiral that pulled many of the energy particles around within, only to regurgitate them upon purification. From this point forth, his spirit had been concentrated into the point mass, creating a true soul. At the same time, due to the protection from the point mass, his resistance toward the previous spiritual force and soul attacks were largely maximized. The point mass, with its extreme density, was the last defense of Leyland's true soul. My true soul! Leyland subconsciously remembered the last moment before he advanced. In that instant, it seemed as though he saw the life and death of the universe, and also the rise and fall of the giant Chem-In serpent clan. It was also at that very moment that his soul truly bonded with his bloodline to form one body, making him a true giant Chem-In serpent warlock. Edges of the world, a warlock's path was one of a bloodline. However, before a warlock reached rank 3, the influence of the bloodline extended only to his body and was not sufficient to affect his soul. Even if the two were linked, they were completely different. But after advancing to the morning star realm, a warlock's true spirit would have harmonized with the power of his bloodline, the two no longer separate. The reason this promotion went so smoothly. Is it that, besides my sufficient preparations, there was a great deal of help from the giant Chem-In serpent bloodline? Leyland contemplated while touching his chin. The giant Chem-In serpent of ancient times was originally a creature that could reach rank 4 at adulthood. My bloodline is incomparably pure as well. After the complete fusion with the spirit and its maturation under the radiation of the lamia finger bone, my body can totally be viewed as a pureblood giant Chem-In serpent. All these factors were key in my promotion to the morning star realm. Now, Leyland could obviously feel that his spirit body possessed a desolate and distant ancient aura. It even glowed a blood red on the outside. The emotional instability of the warlock bloodline can no longer pose a problem to me now that I've promoted to the morning star realm. It has integrated into me as my personal state of mind and emotions, instead of being under the influence of my bloodline. Leyland forced a smile, handing over the bits and pieces of the memories he received about Purgatory World and Shadow World to the AI chip for storage. Although these fragments of memories could be incomparably useful, they were likely to tempt the brutality in his heart. However, as compared to the common bloodline flaw of a warlock, this innate emotion was even harder to control. Because of how pure his bloodline was, Leyland learned a lot of things from his bloodline inheritance when he advanced to rank 4. My path as a giant Chem-In serpent warlock has already come to an end. Leyland stood up, feeling the strong power surging in his body. He couldn't help but feel a little depressed. He had already advanced to the peak of all giant Chem-In warlocks. Those like Gilbert who were older than him had just accumulated more time at the rank. Essentially, there was no difference between the two. Due to the limitation of their bloodline, rank 4 was the highest rank a giant Chemian serpent warlock could reach. This was the shackle of the bloodline, and was a curse no giant Chemian serpent warlock could escape from. Now that his future was bleak, Leyland felt lost. No matter his bloodline or the AI chip, they clearly told him that in his current state, the Morning Star realm was the limit. And this misery killed him. This was the most difficult thing for Leyland to tolerate. He was determined to reach the peak of the Magus world. The stars are boundless. The numerous worlds were even more in number than stars in the universe. Some other world definitely has the solution to this. If not, I can always find the coordinates of the Snake Dowager through the icy world of the Twilight Zone. Leyland comforted himself. His scope was a lot wider now compared to before, and he even had the ability to adventure through astral gates independently. A Magus who advanced to the Morning Star realm could cross over to other worlds on his own. The knowledge and resources they could gain through this were incomparable to the rewards from using a spirit seed. All right, let's do it this way. I'll first lay low for a period of time, stabilizing my Morning Star realm or even trying to reach the peak. Once that's done, I'll immediately adventure through the different planes, Leyland decided. At this moment, an explosion sounded as what seemed to be the tremors of an earthquake made it through the multiple layers of defense being transmitted to the room. This kind of effect even after being damped by my defenses. Leyland's face grew heavy. The situation outside has probably escalated to the extreme. The enemy might even have entered the city. It's time to go. He waved his hand, and a luxurious black gown was automatically draped over his body. He then disappeared from the secret room as if a shadow. If he'd failed to advance to the Morning Star realm this time, Leyland could only wait for the opportunity to escape when the city was destroyed by the enemy. Even that was not likely, because he was still being hunted by the Azure Mountain King. But since he'd already been promoted to one of the most powerful existences in the central continent, he had the confidence to try and rescue the Ouroboros clan. Looking at the genuine Morning Star domain being issued forth from Leyland, even offsetting his own, Cyril's expression turned extremely ugly, as if he was a dead person. Morning Star. This was one of the highest-ranking powers in the entire central continent. It took the protection of a Morning Star Magus for an organization to be called large-scaled, and such organizations could last for millennia. And this time, only after seeing the 3 Morning Star warlocks of the Ouroboros clan disappear did the allied armies set out to attack them. Their own side wasn't irresistible. Once a Morning Star from the other side attacked, more than half their legion would definitely be dead or injured. This was why they were very cautious to the point of being timid. Now that there is a fresh appearance of the Morning Star in the Ouroboros clan, undoubtedly it will strengthen this operation. What did he say? Morning Star. He is a Morning Star. On the battlefield, Julian's face grew dull looking at Leyland's back view and was flabbergasted. He would never have guessed that the Marquis Leyland, who had only recently advanced to the crystal phase, would break through to the Morning Star realm at such a critical juncture. It's Mentor. Mentor has advanced to rank 4. On the other side, a blood-covered Snoopy grew so excited he hugged Parker in revelry. Tanasha smiled while watching from the side. She had always been optimistic about Leyland's future, but she'd never have thought that this day would come so quickly. Compared to them, the expression of another person was very complicated. Leyland Farlier, wasn't he searching for the astral coordinates? So it was actually a pretense for his secret breakthrough to the Morning Star realm. Inside the main control room, Faisal felt the 2 large force fields counteract each other and stood up from the ground, his mood very complicated. With Leyland's protection, it was possible for them to survive this crisis. And what made him feel complicated was that, be it his own painstaking effort or his persistence, it was still a joke in front of the sheer power of the other party. He was just like a soap bubble that could be burst by a mere finger. Duke Gilbert, your student is excellent. After a long time, Faisal sighed, covering up all his disappointment and loss. Shouting himself hoarse through the communications, Ouroboros clan, strike back. Boom. Like a signal light, his command brought about an immediate change. On the battlefield, the numerous warlocks that had recovered suddenly burst forth and struck down the enemies that had come to invade until they drew back, shifting the battlefront to its initial location in no time. Faisal surveyed the battlefield comprehensively without any cheer. He knew well that the key to their victory was not here, but instead, the confrontation with demon hunter Cyril. Leyland is just a newly promoted Morning Star Warlock. Can he obstruct the other party? With a worried heart, Faisal moved his gaze up above and saw an imposing figure blocking Cyril. How about just giving up this time? Leyland started the conversation. Demon hunter Cyril was an impressive existence among Morning Star Magi, not to mention the allies waiting for him. Leyland felt the attention of several conscients watching him the moment he appeared, and one of them even had a scent of deep hatred and shock. Not only Cyril, there are at least 3 or 4 Morning Star Magi observing from the outside. The Azure Mountain King is among them. He understood the situation after a sweep of his soul force. With just you, Cyril jeered. It was not because he looked down on Leyland. But Leyland was obviously a newly promoted Morning Star Warlock, while he himself was an existence who was well known for a long time in the Morning Star circles. It was impossible that he would be frightened by the words of the opponent. If he was, how could he mix in with the others afterwards? Besides, he still had some impression on this young warlock. They were the ones who caused him to fall at the last hurdle and lose a huge share of loots from the Forgotten Land the last time. The new and old hate compounded, and there was no way he would cower. Besides, even if he himself agreed, the others behind him wouldn't. This was a war that they had prepared for over a long time, and the hate had already been planted. How could they back down at his words alone? In that case, Leyland shook his head and seemed very sorry. I can only request that you die first. Crash. Leyland tried to attack first, striking like lightning. Powerful energy waves ripped apart the space and formed a huge rift. A silver spatial wave rippled, swallowing both him and Cyril. They went to the edge of the world to battle. Let's follow them. This type of battle between those at this rank is very rare. If we record it, we can definitely sell it for a sky-high price. Several Morning Star conscients communicated, but another voice chimed in. Although Morning Star Warlocks have the additional power from their bloodline, I still look down on that fellow. Although Cyril has a bad personality, his nickname of Demon Hunter was rightfully earned. I also agree. I bet that Warlock will be defeated in 10 rounds. What do you think, Azure Mountain? The Azure Mountain King touched his chin and recalled the loss previously. Although he wished that Leyland could just be defeated and even killed, he still didn't speak out. You guys need to be careful, that kid is unfathomable. I remember now. Wasn't Azure Mountain's clone killed by a crystal phase warlock? Was it him? Another voice sounded, making the Azure Mountain King's face turn dark. Enough! The largest conscience spoke, and the place suddenly became quiet. Watch their battle carefully. The result of this battle will be the basis of our next actions. A battle between Morning Stars usually lasted a long time, and it was difficult to kill the opponent completely. Thus, Leyland's strength would be the key to the upcoming battle. Great War of the Morning Stars. Although the data paints a similar picture, the magnificent beauty of the edge of the world can't ever be fully described by mere words and pictures. Leyland sighed faintly. Currently, he was in a mysterious space surrounded by darkness. Multiple silver rays of light streaked across among the stars, and it was like the universe in his previous life, boundless and magnificent. Cyril sat opposite him with gloom clouding his face. Subtle chaotic flows of turbulence struck him, but were rebounded by the layer of soul force on his body, unable to cause even the slightest of injuries. All Morning Star Magi possessed the ability to survive in the crevices of space. They relied on it to pass through the different worlds. Of course, it also depended on the grade of the crevices. The one that Leyland chose was situated at the edge of the world. The space there was comparatively stable, and the slight spatial turbulence could easily be held off by one's soul force. If, by any chance, the space encountered violent turbulence similar to that caused by ancient battles, or due to the wild and violent storms occurring within the crevices of 2 worlds, leave alone Morning Star Magi, even Radiant Moon Magi were likely to succumb to the force, leaving just ashes. The Scorpion Man from the icy world had met his death in that exact same manner. Clashes between Morning Star Magi caused extensive damage. A battle between 2 could destroy the entire continent. As such, if any Morning Star Magi desired to take revenge, they would choose to settle scores inside these spatial crevices instead. No matter how extensive the damage was, it would not affect the stability of the world. The venue of the big battle this time was the Ouroboros clan headquarters at Phosphorescence Swamp. If their clash had occurred there, regardless of the outcome, Freya, Parker, and the rest would certainly meet death. In fact, the entire Ouroboros swamp could cease to exist. Leyland definitely would not want that to happen. Hence, he voluntarily dragged the opposite party here. "You're good!" Cyril raised his eyebrows in rage, traces of blue current circulating between them. He felt insulted at being out-schemed by a junior. Even though he didn't want to be criticized by the other Morning Star Magi for starting a battle in the main world, he felt he was entitled to choose another location as the battleground instead of being forced here by the opposite party. "Cyril, this and he matter at the Forgotten Land. Let's settle everything today." Leyland's voice was soft yet strangely firm. He had not let go of his grudge from when he'd almost been killed in a single blow and was forced to take refuge in the main headquarters for over a century. He'd shelved the idea of revenge then due to lacking power, but now the time had come. "How dare you bring up the past?" Cyril fumed as he recounted the interference of these fellows who took away a portion of the gains. If not for them, the natural resources at the Forgotten Land and the Quicksand organization would have all been his. He had also been suppressed by the 3 Morning Star Warlocks and been left with no possible means of escape. "You have to account for your teacher's sins too." Cyril's silver pupils shone with a sharp, icy chill. A long black pike appeared in his hand. Faint, yet audible demonic cries were sounding out from its tip, chilling to the bone. "You're a brat who just advanced to rank 4. Just how much do you understand about the abilities of the Morning Star realm? Prepare to accept your fate of failure." Cyril's growl was steely. "Rank 4 spell, Demon's Wail." He tossed out the pike from his hand. Boom. The horrific scene was like history repeating itself when the legendary giant Argyle threw the auspice that destroyed the sun and killed the sun's child. Violent waves of torrential power descended, and the black pike transformed itself into a ray of black lightning, streaking through the turbulent space before arriving at Leyland. Powered by a Morning Star Magus, soul force, the results of the spell were earth-shattering. "Demon Hunter Cyril, you are indeed worthy of your name," Leyland gasped in admiration. "Unfortunately, I too am not as weak as you think." He had prepared to advance to rank 4 for a long time. During this period, he had managed to acquire some badly damaged rank 4 spell models. With the AI chip simulations, he had managed to repair the content and skillfully grasp them. Besides, the numerous memories he'd inherited from his bloodline also net him a battle experience that was even marginally better than Cyril's. The phantom of a giant Chemian serpent, with large amber eyes, smooth scales, and ferocious razor-sharp teeth hissed from behind Leyland. "Complying with the ancient contract, I call upon the power of the bloodline. Serve me now and transform into a resolute shield." Leyland spoke with a delicate yet intense tone, similar to the hissing of a giant snake, as he chanted awkward-sounding ancient incantations. With every syllable distinct and audible, Leyland chanted the incantations before the pike arrived, completing the spell's preparations and causing everyone an eerie sensation of time disorder. "Bloodline shield." As if in existence from ancient times, a black-scaled shield that had ferocious giant chem in serpent images portrayed on it appeared out of empty space. Crimson lightning still bounced across its surface. Bang! Like a clash between the sun and the moon, or the impact of a star hitting the earth, the long, devilish spike that had transformed into black lightning suddenly bombarded the shield. Blood red and coal-black tangled, and the explosive aftermath was horrifying. A huge spatial turbulence resembling the gushing of a tsunami struck from both sides. If it were the main world, one single wave could have left the entire Ouroboros clan completely destroyed. "No, no way," Cyril yelled hoarsely from afar. From the connection with his soul force, he clearly witnessed the crimson point on his pike fade to its original dull color. The giant Chemian serpent on the shield seemed to have come to life as it opened its mouth and ruthlessly chomped the tip off the pike. The black pike cracked and violently blew up. Space itself rumbled as the turbulence started wreaking havoc. It created enormous sharp rifts that even Leyland and Cyril had to avoid temporarily. "Shield strike." The huge shield collapsed like a mountain, taking aim at Cyril. With Leyland following closely behind, the attack was incomparably fierce. "No way, no way, no way." Cutting a sorry figure, a defensive Cyril yelled despondently, "You're a newly promoted warlock. Why?" He was clearly agonizing over his situation. Leyland was not like a newly promoted morning star at all, being extremely familiar with battling in spatial rifts. His ability to handle difficulties even exceeded that of Gilbert and the rest. It looks like my inherited bloodline is indeed rare. Assessing his expression, Leyland understood his display of abilities had been too outstanding, even exceeding that of the three dukes. The exceptional purity of my own bloodline must have meant that the bloodline inheritance I received is more complete. As for Mentor Gilbert and the rest, what they'd received was much weaker. The inherited memories of a creature were always stored in its bloodline. Thus, if the descendant's blood was pure, the arousal of the inherited memories would be greater, and the inheritance itself would be richer, resulting in more benefits. With the AI chip having purified his bloodline and the Lamia fingerbones supplementation, Leyland could potentially be the best of the Chem-In warlocks. Suddenly, Leyland was clear about his fate, and he had no intentions to be lax about it. Crackle! Multiple black scales appeared on his right hand, morphing into a sharp blade. The runes of the rank 4 Chem-In scales were even more simplistic and reflected only a minimal amount of light but still carried a uniquely daunting aura. Swoosh! A layer of menacing black light surfaced on the blade, and Leyland mercilessly cut across Cyril's chest. The soul force from both sides came into contact. With Leyland's formidable strength and the razor-sharp blade, he successfully broke through Cyril's innate defense. The knife-like blade left a huge wound across his chest, and blood splashed everywhere. It left a hole so large even the organs could be seen within. How? How can it be? Cyril attempted to cover his chest while stumbling backwards, disbelief in his eyes. How can I lose? And to a newly promoted junior? Cyril yelled fiercely, his face distorting with anger. The poise he previously possessed evaporated, and the fury tinged his silver eyes blood red. No, I have not lost. I have my last trump card. Cyril suddenly looked up, his body filled with an extremely dangerous aura. Leyland Farlier, today I will show you what it means to be a true rank 4 Morning Star Magus. The halo of an innate spell appeared from his body before brightening. Rank 1 innate spell, Anarchic Force Field. This was followed by the halo of his rank 2 spell. By the end, Cyril's aura had risen to the maximum, and 4 unstable rings revolved around his body. This was the Morning Star arcane art. Forced to the edge by Leyland, Cyril he'd ended up brazenly using his final trump card. The Morning Star's final technique. The corner of Leyland's mouth curved up in a smile. His old memories of witnessing one being performed had been refreshed, and it came to life. I have one too. Restraining his smile, the brilliant red glow on Leyland's body started twinkling. First, the rank 1 innate spells, Chem-In scales, Petrifying Gaze. A fine layer of black scales covered Leyland's body entirely, and his pupils glowed amber. Next up, the rank 2 innate spell, Toxic Bile. A poison from the ancient times surfaced, swiftly surrounding him. Then the rank 3 spell, Intimidating Gaze. After his promotion to rank 4, the dignified aura exuded by Leyland's body had grown even more terrifying. His body had rightfully regained the power and influence of the giant Chem-In serpent itself. He now radiated the aura of an ancient first-rate predator. Finally, the rank 4 innate spell, Bloodline Metamorphosis, combining to form the ancient Morning Star arcane art, Chem-In serpent transformation. The point mass in Leyland's sea of consciousness started rotating violently, with his and his soul force spurred him on. The 4 innate spells synchronized with each other, with an amplification that caused a horrifying change. Fall of the Morning Star asterisk hiss. In the void that seemed to resemble the universe, a gigantic black serpent emerged. With a body more than 10,000 meters long, it looked like it could swat an entire star out of the way with a sweep of its tail. It was a predator at the top of the food chain, which only existed during the ancient times, and was only heard of in rumors and myths. The giant Chem-In serpent had actually descended. The huge black serpent occupying the void had large amber pupils that resembled stars, and the fine black scales on its body twinkled, reflecting its glossy texture. This wasn't a phantom that was combined with his bloodline aura using spells. This was an actual living being, made of flesh and blood. The Morning Star arcane art of giant Chem-In serpent warlocks was indeed this Chem-In serpent transformation. It allowed the warlock himself to temporarily revert to his ancestral form and turn into a terrifying ancient creature. The ancient Morning Star Realm creature was still completely under the Warlock's control, and he even retained his original spell-casting abilities. With the terrifying strength of the corporeal body and great magical prowess, Chem-In Warlocks at the Morning Star Realm were definitely a nightmare for many Morning Star Magi. Cyril broke out in a cold sweat when he realized that the large pupils were staring right at him, and the fear hidden in his deepest corners of his psyche suddenly burst out. No, no, I still have a Morning Star arcane art. I'll give it my all. At this moment, Cyril had also completed his own Morning Star arcane art. Splendid rays of light exploded forth from his body. Rank 1 innate spell, Chaos Force Field. Rank 2 innate spell, Meteor Force. Rank 3 innate spell, Celestial Explosion. Rank 4 innate spell, Rites of Turbulence. Combining to form the Morning Star arcane art, Aerial Meteor. Bang! The void exploded, and an enormous meteorite that seemed like a star emerged, transforming into a streak that charged towards Leyland, and fire flickered continuously in the space the meteorite traveled through. The giant Chem-In serpent hissed, greeting the huge meteor in a great clash, just like in the legends. Above phosphorescent swamp in the Magus world, numerous Morning Star conscients were at a loss for words. How? How could it be? Why is that youngster's Chem-In serpent transformation so strong? After a long silence, the strongest central thought spoke up. The strength of a warlock's innate spell is not only decided based on their rank, but also on the bloodline. The purer the bloodline, the more powerful the warlock. What you're saying is that the purity of that fellow's bloodline is even higher than that of Gilbert and the other two. Yes, it's such a regret that we didn't discover him earlier and kill him, now that we have allowed him to grow. The central conscient sighed, feeling that it was a great pity. Seems like Cyril is bound to lose. Soon after, the numerous voices started making gurgling sounds like strangled ducks. Even the Morning Star Magi watching the battle were alarmed. You must be joking. How is this possible? They seemed to have seen something unfathomable happening before their eyes and sank into collective despair. Buzz, above the battlefield, the void contorted. Leyland changed into his black Magus robe and proudly straightened himself. Upon seeing him, the numerous bloodline warlocks below finally heaved a sigh of relief, yelling forth, "Leyland! Leyland!" However, the shouting from the crowd suddenly stopped. This was because Leyland had lifted up a head, one that didn't even have the chance to die a peaceful death with its eyes closed. It had thin lips and silver eyes, just that they had lost their luster. This was the head of the demon hunter, Cyril. Demon hunter Cyril has already fallen in battle. Which one of you would like to be next? Leyland stood proudly on the battlefield with Cyril's head held high and looked around. This rank 4 Magus had always been held in high regard for a long time, and was even seen as a Morning Star Magus. But now, he had actually fallen right in front of their eyes. It wasn't just the Magi in the allied armies, but even the warlocks of the Ouroboros clan who pinched themselves, unable to believe their eyes, and thinking that they were dreaming. The battlefield fell into a deathly stillness for a moment. When the warlocks regained their senses, they all started screaming wildly. All this while, the burden they had been carrying in their hearts was too heavy. Now that they had the chance, they naturally unloaded everything off their chests, and they even seemed to have gone a little insane. At the same time, Leyland was also communicating with other Morning Star Magi. "You shouldn't have killed him," a large conscient sounded. "This is a war, an endless fight to the death." Leyland refused to concede. "Does this mean that you will fight us to death as well?" The other party was naturally not startled by Leyland's threat. "Of course not. If you still decide to continue to battle, I will abandon the Ouroboros clan headquarters and flee, then attack your territory." Leyland answered without a single bit of shame, and instead caused the other party to be caught in a dilemma. The battles between Morning Star Magi usually lasted for long periods of time. If one could not subdue the other and let him escape, no organization would be able to withstand the consequences if he came back for revenge. Leyland had already proven with his military accomplishments that he wasn't your average newly advanced Morning Star warlock. He had great capabilities, even among those at the Morning Star realm. His enemies, who were Morning Star Magi, would be able to defeat him if they joined forces, but they would have to pay a tremendous price. It would also pose a problem if he ran away after they suffered serious injuries. The risk was not nearly worth the reward, and with the possibility of a hidden danger being present, even Morning Star Magi would not attack head-on. The many conscients immediately started quarreling. Are we going to let him go just like that? He killed Cyril. Doesn't Cyril still have a doppelganger? It is only at rank 3, what use does it have? Furthermore, Cyril has bad blood with many other Morning Star Magi, and they won't let this chance slip by. He's as good as dead. No, we cannot let him go. The Azure Mountain King bore the most hatred towards Leyland. Really? Leyland's voice was transmitted to his mind directly. Dear Azure Mountain King, if the Allied armies still decide to start a war in the end, I can guarantee that the Stardust bugs will immediately be made known across the whole of the central continent. The Azure Mountain King, was startled. He glanced around his surroundings. Seeing that none of the Magi discovered that he was communicating with Leyland, he spoke with less restraint. Are you threatening me? Yes, I am, Leyland answered without a tinge of modesty. Now that I am already a Morning Star Magus, you can't erase all traces of me. In comparison to you, how many people will choose to believe me? He even added another sentence at the end, which ruthlessly pierced through the Azure Mountain King's heart like a dagger. Also, I seem to have found some possibly disastrous items among your grandson's belongings. So many interesting sketches. If they are leaked, I'm afraid. Enough! The Azure Mountain King's tone went an octave higher, and he had no choice but to accept a compromise. I promise you. Even as he said this, his heart was bleeding. He understood that with such an agreement, not only would he be unable to seek revenge in the future, he would also be subjected to Leyland's threats. However, he had no other way out. After all, his strength was not even as great as Cyril's. If Leyland could kill even Cyril, using military force against him would just be a joke. Damn it! How could such a thing happen? On the ground, in the command center of the Allied troops, the bloodline warlocks on the entire front line were counterattacking. This made the green-haired commander hysterical, especially with Leyland having just attacked and killed a Morning Star Magus. What do we do? What do we do? Hesitation flashed across his face, and the green-haired Magus tightly clenched his teeth. Order the Kayasha beast to attack with full force and self-destruct at the end. Even if we cannot reap the fruits of the battle, we have to make sure the other party suffers great losses. We have to at least get rid of that giant serpent puppet. The Kayasha beast and the duo serpent annihilator of the Ouroboros clan were both puppets, artificially manufactured products at the Morning Star level. Although they had partial Morning Star strength, they were unable to fully put it to use. They were not very intelligent either, and were rather rigid. But even so, the terrifying damage one could cause upon self-destruction could not be looked down upon. If Leyland didn't pay attention, forget the duo serpent annihilator, even the entire town of Warlocks would be reduced to ruin. Just like how other Morning Star Magi were apprehensive towards Leyland, but did not take action. It would not be wise for Leyland to harm the green-haired Magus just because of the damage he caused, because threats would always be mutual. The green-haired Magus then made a decision. He fished out a necklace from his waist pouch, adorned with emerald. He was about to issue an order. At this moment, he was greeted with a fragrant smell. A figure that he was familiar with appeared behind him, and the smell of perfume lingered around the tip of his nose. Quit playing around, I'm doing something serious. The green-haired Magus furrowed his brows, but didn't push the other party away. He knew this person all too well, thus he took no precaution at all. All of a sudden, his face turned blank. He lowered his head, seemingly in excruciating pain, and saw the tip of a blade sticking out of his chest. Fresh, scarlet blood stained the knife, dripping down. A gentle voice explained next to his ear. The Minister of the Dark Serpent Department, Trellis, sends her regards. You! Blood foamed at his mouth continuously. He had not been wary of that female Magus at all, and his innate defense was as weak as paper when faced with that dagger. This mission was completed successfully, all thanks to you. Also, don't even think about using the life entrustment spell to reincarnate. I already learned of the location a long time ago. One last thing, your choice was a grave mistake. You really shouldn't have turned against us. The lady's voice seemed like the sweetest venom, entering the male Magus body along with the dagger. His vitality trickled away unceasingly, and even his vision was starting to blur. Soon after, a black ray of light flashed, and the ring finger on his left hand was burnt to ashes. As a high-ranking Magus, and also the commander of the Allied armies, he had methods that he could use as a last resort to ensure his survival, the most important one being the life entrustment spell. This would allow him to transfer his soul to any part of his body. As long as that part still existed, he would be able to reincarnate. But what a pity it was that the other party had already seen through it all. Post-war asterisk boom. Upon pulling out the dagger, a beautiful red-haired female Magus grabbed the emerald necklace from the male Magus expressionlessly. Command! GKLM! After a series of spells, the aura of the gemstone necklace burst forth, as if a miniature war giant had emerged from its core. Get as far from here as possible, beginning self-destruct procedure. After she coldly issued the command, the necklace in the female Magus hands immediately turned to ashes. Shortly after, her entire body was engulfed in a dark green flame, disappearing into thin air. The headquarters Allied army had been thrown into confusion. It instantly became a mess, and some of the soldiers had already chosen to retreat. Very good, very good. The Shadow Snake department of your Ouroboros clan has even infiltrated our main command post. The conscient in the middle gritted his teeth. How would I know? In his heart, Leyland rolled his eyes. Previously, his position in the Ouroboros clan was not one where he would be exposed to such things, but it did not stop him from improvising. War is always unscrupulous. Now, it's your choice. With the current state of the Allied army, I'm afraid that even without us attacking, it will immediately descend into chaos. Leyland spoke very confidently, as if he was the one who had sent out the female spy. The Kayasha beast growled, abandoning the fight with the duo serpent annihilator as it made a run for the outer regions, causing the ground to shake vigorously. The Allied army soldiers and its surroundings became minced meat one after the other. Big chunks of flesh fell off its body even as it ran. This was the activation of the previous self-destruct command. Watching this, many of the conscients fell into a silence, then began to talk to one another soon after. Leyland smiled confidently instead. Now, they were evidently carrying out an arduous but unrewarding job, and were in the midst of hesitation. And just now, the most stubborn Azure Mountain King had been changed from opposing him to being a supporter. With these changes, the strong force that had at least 2 votes had become the one to decide between the 2 previously evenly matched choices. Indeed, after a short moment, the large conscient emitted huge soul force waves, communicating with the many soldiers of the Allied army. After receiving orders, the Azure Rain Knights, as well as the other numerous Allied magi, began to retreat gradually. Only the Demon Magus army and a few other small organizations like the Arm of Vengeance held their positions with a look of helplessness on their faces. You have won this time, the large conscient spoke from opposite him. Thank you all. I only need to preserve the core territory, which is Phosphorescence Swamp. As for this war, pin the blame on the City of Sins, Nephas, and that Arm of Vengeance. Leyland quit while he was ahead, speaking with a slight bow. What he meant was to maintain the current situation, make the opponent hand over all the territories they were occupying, and not to look into the responsibilities of other forces. Leyland had considered things thoroughly. Because of the support of the 3 dukes, the Ouroboros clan could originally hold such a large territory. Now, with him alone, the results of this war were considered a success. Furthermore, with his current frail strength, forming rivalries with so many Morning Star forces was unrealistic. He could only assign a few scapegoats to settle the problem. The Arm of Vengeance was originally a predetermined choice. With the addition of Nephas, which had already lost its Morning Star protection, it was enough. Very well, you have made the right choice. A hint of rare gentleness floated in the conscient's voice. I believe in the future, we will become good friends. The interactions between those at the Morning Star realm was this simple. Once they realized they could not completely annihilate the other party, it was very normal to humble themselves to form good relationships. 2 great forces in heated conflict could sometimes bury the hatchet the next day. All of this was definitely not unlinked to the Morning Star Magi backing them. If not for Leyland coming out of the blue this time, how would these starving wolves have been so easy to convince? Perhaps the entire Ouroboros clan would have been swallowed up without any remains. Swoosh. Many conscients disappeared, and only at this time did Leyland slowly heave a sigh of relief. He knew that, at least for now, the Ouroboros clan had crossed its predicament. Sir Leyland! Sir Leyland! Sir Leyland! On the ground, many of the bloodline warlocks had injuries on their bodies. As they watched the Allied army retreat, they could not help but rejoice. Especially upon seeing Leyland's gaze, it was as if they had seen a deity. Faisal, who saw the scene, could only smile bitterly to himself. He knew that from then on, the entire Ouroboros clan would probably fall into the hands of the Morning Star Warlock floating above. Aye, where is this? Freya groaned. After waking up, she looked at the familiar ceiling with a little disorientation in her eyes. Suddenly, the devastating Great War, the blood and flesh flying all over, the appearance of a Morning Star Magus emerged one by one in her mind. At the end was that pair of gentle eyes. The chief has awakened. The two pretty maids at the side noticed Freya coming too, and they immediately rejoiced, scurrying out. After a moment, Freya, who had regained her usual astuteness and capabilities, tidied up her clothing and sat by the bed. Listening to the many elders who had rushed here, as well as Julian's narration, her tiny lips slowly spread apart. That means, Leyland, oh no, Sir Leyland has already advanced to rank 4 to the Morning Star realm, Freya muttered, unsure of the feeling in her heart. Previously, it was because she had been driven by Leyland that she went into seclusion in order to cultivate and advance into the crystal phase. She had originally thought that she had shaken him off, but little did she know that Leyland would display such great strength at the crystal phase after that, even advancing before her. Now, he had even broken through the Morning Star bottleneck directly, achieving the dream of many of the Central Continent's magi, rank 4. Furthermore, he had even killed demon hunter Cyril in one blow, and with a determined stance remedied the Ouroboros clan's perilous situation. So, without me even realizing it, the gap between us has already grown so large. Freya's eyes grew hot, almost tearing up. However, after having trained for such a long time, she was able to hold it in by force of will, not exhibiting the slightest bit of emotion on her face. Yes, according to Sir Leyland's previous diagnosis, your spiritual force is exhausted. You require more rest. Julian looked at Freya carefully, making eye contact with most of the clan elders. Deep in their hearts, they were extremely impressed by Freya's previous support for Leyland. Now that he had been promoted to the Morning Star realm, even obtaining the great power of making changes the Ouroboros clan, he would definitely favor their clan in the future. Even, some elders stole glances at Freya. Because she was seriously injured, Freya's face was slightly pale, yet it did not cover up her touching expression. It was a pitiful look. If this clan leader could mesmerize Sir Leyland, wouldn't the clan be able to introduce a Chem-In bloodline of the Morning Star rank? Just the mere thought of it made these elders flush red, and their bodies trembled uncontrollably. No need, I'd like to see him. Freya took the thick fur jacket, draped it over her shoulders, and walked out. The physique of a crystal phase warlock was beyond one's imagination. With only a short rest, Freya's body was more or less recovered, posing no problem for her to move around on her own. Julian wanted to follow her initially, but was stopped by an elder with a strange, smiling face. The heart of the Ouroboros clan's regime was originally a senate formed by the 3 Morning Star warlocks. However, with Leyland as the only one left, he could naturally decide everything as he wished. He no longer worked in his own manor, but in the most luxurious hall in the headquarters. Many high-ranked warlocks bowed humbly, awaiting orders from the young Magus on the throne. Dark Serpent Section, the military, the technical department, 57 marquises, as well as many earls and viscounts have announced their loyalty to your highness. They are all willing to follow your highness and revere your highness as the highest veteran of the Ouroboros clan. A smile of flattery hung on Faisal's face. Like the most loyal dog, his back was hunched almost 90 degrees as he reported to Leyland. Very good. Leyland was now wearing a platinum robe embroidered with a fierce black serpent. In the vibrant lights and colors, even the totem of the giant Chem-In serpent was on the robe. At the sides of the robe, many runes were sewed on with thin golden thread. The robe itself was a low-grade magic artifact, and Leyland, who wore it, seemed much more majestic for it. Being on the throne was like being the central power of the universe, and it had him brimming with dignity. As he watched Faisal and the other warlocks giving him an abnormal amount of respect, a playful smirk curled up at the corner of Leyland's lips. Ever since the war ended, these warlocks immediately crowned him lord, showing the utmost respect for him. The strong rule, this had always been a fundamental truth. Furthermore, with Leyland's current strength and the reputation of saving the clan from its perilous situation, even if they disagreed, he could force a massacre upon his subordinates. By that time, things would no longer be as simple as handing over power. Hence, these warlocks were very obedient, fearful of Leyland finding their weaknesses. Thump. After Freya stepped into the hall, 2 rows of warlocks immediately stared at her, giving forth a pressure that even she could not endure. Blood Serpent Marquis Freya greets Sir Leyland. Freya was also unsure of the feelings in her heart, and she just bowed respectfully. Everyone except Freya leave, Leyland nodded. The 2 rows of warlocks immediately exited in an orderly manner, shutting the door silently to make space for Leyland and Freya. What's wrong? Leyland stepped down, watching the slightly strong-headed yet confused and fearful Freya, accurately capturing the trace of fear deep in her eyes. You really are different now. Freya muttered softly as she watched the heroic young warlock before her. From his aura that was as calm as the ocean that had an extraordinariness to it, one could tell that he had really advanced to that far-fetched morning star realm and was probably even stronger than her mentor. It was just that, such a powerful Leyland gave Freya an urge to cry instead. Taking action with a sweep of his soul force, everything regarding Freya was revealed in front of Leyland. Your injuries are pretty much healed up, though your sea of consciousness still needs nourishment. I recommend the giant serpent's spirit potion. There are already very few crystal phase warlocks like you in the Ouroboros clan. Leyland sighed. After the great battle, the 10 or so crystal phase warlocks had dwindled in number to a pitiful 7 or 8. Even Leyland's senior, Lucian, had been unlucky enough to lose his life at the hands of the Plant Legion. In a situation like this where there were few trump cards remaining, Leyland knew that even though he was in charge, every single crystal phase Magus was a precious resource. Many thanks, my lord, Freya bowed, seemingly very solemn. Oh, right, one more thing. I hope the Blood Serpent family can help me arrange for my Morning Star ceremony. Morning Star Magi had very high statuses in the central continent, especially since it was so difficult to advance. Every instance of it was a joyous matter worthy of celebration with a huge circle of friends, and was even a grand ceremony for the entire continent. Based on conventional practices, each appearance of a Morning Star Magus meant that there had to be something like a ceremony. This was an announcement of power, which was even more important for the Ouroboros clan, given its current state. The bloodline warlocks, who were in a state of chaos, were in desperate need of a burst of motivation. It shall be my family's honor to do so. Leaving it to her family meant valuing her. Whatever it was, this was beneficial to the Blood Serpent family. As the leader, Freya could not reject them, nor did she have any reason to do so. I am also planning to release another piece of news during the ceremony. Watching Freya, who was biting her lips with an odd look on her face below him, Leyland smirked. What is it? After the ceremony, I shall organize a huge wedding and marry you into my family. The words that left Leyland's mouth were earth-shattering, leaving Freya completely stunned. Marry into your family. Freya repeated it like a mantra, her childlike features perplexed. Leyland was a warlock who had recently joined and basically had no support from any bloodline families. Yes, the Farlier family. Although there's only me on the central continent for now, I believe we'll become the first family of the Ouroboros clan. We'll even become the best of all bloodline families. Leyland touched his nose. Though he was the only warlock in his family, and it seemed pitiful, Leyland didn't care. After all, how could a family with a Morning Star Magus be common? With his pure bloodline, the chances of his descendants advancing were much higher than for other warlocks. In no time, it would be capable of becoming the greatest family in the Ouroboros clan. The central continent was much too large. Though Leyland now held control over the Ouroboros clan, he needed to develop an organization that was uniquely his. How could there be anything that could beat a family he created himself? Others would have another layer of bloodline restrictions, and this would count as insurance for himself. In addition, he who had already reached the Morning Star realm no longer had to worry about the leakage of information regarding the purity of his bloodline. He now held enough strength to protect himself. Since he needed a female warlock to spread his bloodline, Leyland naturally chose Freya. First of all, she was clean and honest and treated him well. She looked pretty as well. What else was there to hesitate over? What if I reject you? Freya bit her lips, slightly unwilling. Though she liked Leyland, she didn't want things to go this way. You can't reject anyway. I rule the Ouroboros clan. Leyland's tone could not be questioned. The rims of Freya's eyes reddened, and she lightly grasped Leyland's hands. I know you're unwilling to do this because you're hoping I'll marry into your family instead of the other way around. Is that right? Leyland completely saw through Freya. Deep inside, Freya still hoped to bring Leyland into the blood serpent family, but this was obviously not possible. The Leyland right now would definitely not agree to this at all. Even before he advanced, he would only get others to do as he wished, and there were never instances of others getting him to do something. One had to acknowledge that Leyland was a male chauvinist. He would marry Freya of his own accord, and not because he was thankful towards her. And he would definitely not marry into her family. You know all this, but why? Freya raised her head, face glimmering with tears as she protested. Seeing her reacting this way, Leyland knew that she had pretty much made up her mind and couldn't help but chuckle. Because I am stronger than you. This is what you're destined to do. Strength ruled the Magus world. This was an undisputable truth. Since Freya had completely given in, Leyland softened his tone and began to console her. Don't worry. I will naturally take care of your family. When we have many children, I can even send a son over to the blood serpent family. This was an attempt at pacifying her. Since Freya had done so much for Leyland, he had to pay her back. However, Leyland's nature was such that he had to take the initiative instead of being begged to act. Upon hearing this guarantee, Freya nodded, finally at ease. Leyland could tell that Freya had nodded slightly and agreed, and laughed heartily at that. The battle that happened at Phosphorescent Swamp swept through the central continent like a whirlwind. In particular, Leyland's exceptional and powerful appearance, from how he had killed the demon hunter Cyril and caused his fall, increased the enthusiasm towards the situation till the extreme. Demon hunter Cyril was not a nobody, even amongst the Morning Star circles. Rather, his strength had been proven to surpass the masses, and as a newly advanced Morning Star warlock, Leyland had been able to cause his downfall. Such strength immediately led to the dread of other Morning Star magi. From the outside, it seemed like not only had the allied armies that had attacked the Ouroboros clan completely withdrawn from key regions such as Phosphorescent Swamp, they had even drawn a certain line of isolation, seemingly wanting to avoid conflict. After the fall of the main body of Morning Star Magus Cyril, Nephas, the city of Sin, fell into a state of confusion. The Magi there weren't good people from the start, and mostly comprised of vicious bandits and those with death warrants for them. Without Cyril's suppression, the place grew rife with violence. The areas surrounding Nephas gradually descended further into chaos as news about the death of Cyril's clone came in, confirming his fall. In that period, spells flew everywhere in the city, and the architecture was engulfed in a sea of flames. As many demon magi gleefully broke into Cyril's Magus Tower and were prepared to loot the place as they wished, a large number of elite Magus armies suddenly descended upon them. Under the suppression of the Magus army, as well as with a Morning Star Magus help, the chaos in Nephas died down. After losing the deterring power of Cyril, the defenseless Nephas had basically turned into a giant gold mine, attracting the interests of many Morning Star Magi. This was especially true for those few Morning Star Magi in the original Allied army. In the name of their comrades, they dispatched forces and took over the city, making up for all their previous losses. By the time the matter with Nephas had died down, an even more startling piece of news spread throughout the central continent. The one who had caused Cyril's fall based on his own strength, and thus protected the Ouroboros clan, the Morning Star Magus Leyland Farlier, had invited many friendly organizations to his Morning Star ceremony. In response to this invitation, many large-scaled organizations who had intentionally kept a distance due to their disdain towards the Ouroboros clan saw a chance to repair this relationship and sent people to attend. Other organizations also saw the ceremony as a great chance to figure out the situation within the Ouroboros clan and to better understand Leyland's strength. They, too, sent out spies or envoys. During that time, numerous magi hurried towards Phosphorescent Swamp, causing the swamp to be bustling with life, a huge contrast from the normal deathly silence. Within the city headquarters, Leyland reclined on the couch comfortably, listening to the female Magus reporting from beside him. The messengers we sent out have mostly returned with positive replies. Most of the emissaries of those organizations have already set out. Recently, Phosphorescent Swamp has not been very orderly. Though preparations for the ceremony are completed, I think it's necessary to prepare a few emergency contingencies. Freya leant against the couch while holding countless files and wearing a pair of frameless glasses, seemingly very busy. Let's do as you say. Also, the bloodline warlocks from Spirit Circle and Wind Wolf Lair are about to reach headquarters. You need to take some time out to meet them. After finishing her report, Freya laughed delicately and moved away from the couch, leaving quickly. After she left, Leyland's expression turned serious. He put on white gloves and produced a broken sword. This sword had the style of casting in ancient times. It was cold and sharp, and even time could do nothing to weaken its firmness. There were even traces of golden-colored blood on the blade. I never expected for the bloodline of the sun's child and the wing of the sun to reach my hands. Sensing the powerful bloodline strength on the sword's hilt, a hint of a smile revealed about Leyland's lips. This broken sword was one of the treasures from the Azure Mountain auction. Cyril had shamelessly used his status and pressurized others so he could purchase it. Leyland had really wanted to get his hands on it, but for one, he did not have enough magic crystals. On top of that, he did not dare go head-to-head with Cyril. However, this was no longer an issue. Even Cyril's main body had fallen at Leyland's hands. The items he had hoarded and brought along on his body had naturally been kindly accepted by Leyland. Besides many precious materials and countless magic crystals, what he'd really desired was this item. Beep, top-grade meditation technique, Wing of the Sun recorded. The AI chip transmitted. Hopefully it's useful for Kem-In's pupil. Leyland sighed, keeping the giant sword well. Kem-In's pupil was merely a high-grade meditation technique with the 4th level as the limit. It was impossible to progress further. For Leyland, this was absolutely unacceptable. Celebration based on the traditions of the central continent, high-grade meditation techniques had a minimum of 4 levels, allowing Magi to enter the morning star realm. Top-grade meditation techniques needed to have 6 or more levels, allowing Magi to understand the path to the breaking dawn. Kem-In's pupil had merely 4 levels and was considered the bottom of the pack among high-grade meditation techniques. Leyland naturally hoped the AI chip could simulate the rest of the levels. Leyland had been trying to solve the issue of the bloodline shackles since advancing to the morning star realm. The simulation of meditation techniques was very important. The Wing of the Sun was also a meditation technique for bloodline warlocks, and there were 6 complete levels. It would surely be extremely helpful in completing Kem-In's pupil. Since he had the bloodline of the sun's child as well, he could attempt to purify it. Though the Oakheart clan had already confirmed that the bloodline had lost all vitality, Leyland still had some confidence that he could restore it. The ancient sun's child was a being that could reach rank 6 when it matured. It was even a fixed sun for multiple small worlds, and was, therefore, the best bloodline Leyland had gotten to date. With this, I can begin the bloodline experiments. After advancing to the morning star realm, many ancient bloodline experiments, and things like the interplanar experiments, could be undertaken independently. Leyland was extremely eager to spend all his time on this. However, he still took some time to meet the emissaries from Spirit Circle and Wind Wolf Lair the next day. It wasn't only the Ouroboros clan that held bloodline warlocks in the central continent. There were other organizations and families that had inherited ancient bloodlines, forming a giant alliance. However, the 3 Morning Star Magi of the Ouroboros clan had disappeared all of a sudden, resulting in a drop in their value. Hence, no aid had been given. Leyland understood this very well, since even when saving allies, one had to see if they were powerful enough. Otherwise, they would only be bringing trouble upon themselves. Besides, the various warlock organizations weren't exactly tight-knit. There were conflicts, and a loose alliance was basically as good as a non-existent one. Of course, things were different with Leyland's ascension. It was especially so after he displayed his strength. All these former allies rushed forth to mend their relationship. Spirit Circle and Wind Wolf Lair were the 2 largest bloodline warlock organizations that the Ouroboros clan was close to. Hee, Sire Leyland is so young. This was entirely out of my expectations. The moment they met, the 2 warlocks were blown away by the plentiful life force brimming in Leyland. Magi obviously did not rely on appearances to determine age. They usually had their own unique methods to determine it. However, no matter which angle they looked at him from, Leyland was extremely young. He was not like those Magi who were approaching their end and looked young from the outside, yet held a rotting scent. Hee, the 2 of you, please. Leyland was now dressed in a platinum robe that was a piece of magic equipment, giving him a more elegant aura. With his experience in controlling places like the Twilight Zone, he had already developed a distinct aura of a ruler in how he treated others, which made him all the more convincing. Meanwhile, while the two emissaries were stunned at Leyland's age, Leyland himself was also shocked. He could feel the energy of the point mass on these two emissaries. In other words, they were actually Morning Star Warlocks as well. Looks like these two organizations are taking this very seriously. The smile on Leyland's face became even more welcoming as he invited the two warlocks to the couch in his room. Freya brought 3 cups of coffee over, bowing to the 3 of them unreservedly as she quickly left. "By the way, I've yet to ask you for your names." Leyland smiled as he spoke. "Oh, look at me. I was so surprised when I came that I didn't introduce myself." "How impolite of me." A Magus with countless tentacles on his face that looked like a giant octopus head palmed his forehead with a tentacle and answered, "I'm Paul from Spirit Circle." "Sir Paul," Leyland nodded in recognition, seeming serious. The bloodline Spirit Circle had inherited came from a strange creature, the spirit-sucking oddity. It was said that this being not only had a unique spirit body, it even enjoyed sucking the brain juices of intelligent beings, and had the strange ability of peeking at someone's spirit. What caused countless bloodline warlocks to rip their hair out in frustration was that this spirit-sucking oddity was no bloodline creature. However, the original spirit-sucking oddity warlock had fused the ability of this creature into his own bloodline and passed it down, resulting in this strange branch of bloodline warlocks. This branch was named the Spirit Warlock and had a very special strength. They were more partial towards attacks on the mind, and it was difficult to resist them. At this point, Leyland couldn't help but look into his eyes. On the giant octopus head were a pair of dark eyeballs with no pupils, looking like a dead fish's eyes. However, the moment their gazes met, Leyland felt as if his heart was being stripped and laid bare before him. Wang. The point mass in his body rumbled and soul force swept through. The discomfort instantly vanished, and Leyland immediately put on his guard even though he smiled at the other party. "I am Philip of the Wind Wolf Lair. Greetings, sir." The other was a middle-aged, burly white man. His face and body were filled with hair, and his sideburns were very straight. Compared to spirit warlocks, Windwolf Lair was an orthodox bloodline warlock organization that had inherited the bloodline of the ancient windwolves. They were exceptionally sensitive towards wind elemental particles. On top of that, Windwolf Lair was a very well-known bloodline warlock organization in the central continent that maintained good relations with other warlocks. They had very deep roots. "Philip and Sir Paul," Leyland nodded. "It is my honor for the two of you to attend my ceremony." Whether it was Leyland or the other two warlocks, all of them were very satisfied. Though there weren't any deep discussions, this was a good beginning. After that, however, Leyland could not bring himself to feel happy, as the two warlocks brought him shocking news. Jupiter's lightning. After unexpectedly finding out who was responsible for attacking the Ouroboros clan, Leyland's expression turned grim. Even if he hadn't been privy to the knowledge among the Morning Star Circle before his own advancement, even he had heard of this organization's fame in the central continent. Compared to organizations such as Nepha's and Azure Mountain City, Jupiter's lightning was even more tremendous, and perhaps even surpassed the Ouroboros clan. It was a shadow that loomed over the continent, and was perhaps more similar to a bandit guild. It regularly took on assassinations, bounties, and the like, preferring to stir up chaos and exploiting it. The reason why they were so fearless was due to the manipulator behind them. It was a Radiant Moon Magus. A Radiant Moon Magus was also a Great Rank 5 Magus, and they were even rarer than Morning Star Magi, as well as much more formidable. In the entire central continent, there were probably less than 20 of them. It could be said that besides the few Breaking Dawn Magi there were, the rest of them split the central continent amongst themselves. Hearing that Ouroboros clan was being targeted by such a person, even Leyland couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. Paul and Philip exchanged a glance, and noticing Leyland's peaceful expression, nodded. "Don't worry. As allies, we will provide a certain amount of assistance, such that at least the Radiant Moon Magus will likely not deal with you personally." "Do you mean that if the other Morning Star Magi of Jupiter's lightning attack, I have to take them all on myself?" Leyland rolled his eyes inside, but his expression was that of gratitude. "Thank you so much." In reality, he had serious suspicions that these two organizations wanted them to fight. Perhaps they had been the ones to provoke Jupiter's lightning, and yet were now pretending to take the brunt of the damage for the Ouroboros clan, and were insincere about sending aid. Of course, he was no child and would not believe everything these Morning Star Magi told him. He would only trust them after performing his own checks. This was a very simple matter. Though he was unfamiliar with the Morning Star's conscient, he had already recorded the aura fluctuations. With more Morning Star samples, he would be able to make comparisons. He even had a spy like the Azure Mountain King, so information was not an issue. At the thought of the Azure Mountain King, Leyland's gloomy mood was lifted, and he began to anticipate ascension ceremony. Boom, 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 countless giant fireworks exploded in midair. The headquarters of Ouroboros clan had been painted over, and now no longer had any traces from the battle. There were even fresh flowers and streamers along all the pathways. The guests from the other organizations in the central continent all had sincere grins on their faces. Under the guidance of the Warlocks of Ouroboros clan, they headed towards the heart of the city. This was a palace that had been constructed in a hurry for Leyland, the location of the ceremony. In order to curry favor with the only Morning Star Warlock in the organization, as well as the husband of their family's leader, the Blood Serpent family Warlocks had done all they could and arranged everything tidily. They had even gone out of their way and brought out lavish liquor and delicacies, many of which were unique resources in the Magus world that could increase spiritual force and the effects of meditation. There were so many that they seemed dirt cheap, and it resulted in looks of admiration and surprise. Many guests were gathered in a hall, though they were separated clearly into tens of little circles. Bloodline warlocks and magi had 2 large circles, and within those, another 10 or so were formed based on various factors like power, ranking, level of intimacy, and so on. The warlocks and magi were like the ladies and gentlemen of high society, conversing courteously and occasionally toasting each other. The atmosphere was harmonious, and it was unthinkable that some of the people here had been eager for the death of the other party just a few days ago. Assuming the post, "It's time to start the ceremony." Parker's tone conveyed his high spirits and excitement. He was wearing the suit of a compere, and his hair was sleekly styled. His previous investment at this time had gained him the most returns. Leyland was advancing at the speed of light, far beyond his own predictions. It made him feel like he was in a dream. With unanimous joyous cheers, Leyland stepped on the flower petals laid out on his path as he entered the hall, wearing a magical robe with a gold crown on his head. At the same moment, an overbearing and horrifying force similar to that of an ancient beast was slowly released from his body. From his eyes, one could faintly see the image of an enormous black serpent which was several tens of thousands of meters long. Morning Star. The formidability of a true Morning Star made many magi and warlocks bow their heads respectfully to welcome him. Some of the sullen emissaries were also so overwhelmed by his aura that they too bowed, albeit rather unwillingly. In accordance with the rules, warlocks of the Ouroboros clan who are promoted to the Morning Star realm will fundamentally acquire the noble title of a duke. Congratulations to you, Duke Farlier. Faisal stepped up and ceremoniously handed a snake-shaped scepter embedded with jet-black crystals to Leyland, who accepted it effortlessly and raised it up. Numerous bloodline warlocks stood up and bowed in salutation. Greetings, Duke Leyland. This was a tradition of the Ouroboros clan, something shared by many other Magus organizations. Yet, for Faisal himself to do it meant that Leyland had already succeeded in suppressing internal strife. Seeing this unfold, many influential emissaries were left in deep thought. "The ceremony shall begin," Parker yelled after Leyland was seated. "The emissary from the rustic woodlands, Louis, greets Duke Leyland." An old fellow dressed in a red suit took the lead and saluted Leyland. "The Lord's promotion to the Morning Star is a grand occasion for all of us in the central continent. This is a gift from our master." The entourage standing behind him lifted the cloth off a tray to reveal a rock shimmering with brilliance. An astral stone. Such a huge astral stone is rare indeed. The rustic woodlands is so magnanimous. The comments from the surrounding visitors were incessant. Leyland nodded his head and smiled, evidently very pleased. Such opportunities to receive free gifts without obligations were always welcomed. "I have just been promoted to the Morning Star, and my need for astral stones is undeniable." "Thank your master on my behalf." Leyland expressed his contentment, and the emissary was delighted. He bowed again and retreated. Duke Leyland, I am the emissary from the Fowler family, and I present to you a personalized private ride, the Colossal Serpent. Another emissary stepped forward and presented a core controller. In the middle of it, an image of a private airship could be seen. The detailing and ornamentation of the warship structure were vivid and thorough. That is very considerate of you. Leyland nodded his head. The Fowler family controlled the entire airship network. They also had the support of the monarch of the skies, and gifting every newly promoted morning star their very own airship was their tradition. As such, Leyland voiced, I thank the kindness of Chief Fowler and the monarch of the skies. Perceiving Leyland to have understood their intentions, the emissary respectfully bowed and retreated. Almost immediately, yet another emissary stepped forward. The etiquette for this ceremony was complicated, but Leyland still had to receive them one by one and express his own goodwill. It would be extremely important and beneficial for the Ouroboros clan. Leyland was brimming with enthusiasm and was all smiles. He conversed casually with many of the emissaries with ease, showing no impatience. At this time, a Magus with a head of brown hair who was wearing a silver robe stepped forward. Impressive undulations emitted from his body without restraint. He clearly lacked manners and was disrespectful in front of Leyland. You've come with ill intentions. Leyland's eyes narrowed and he glared at the Magus. Greetings, my lord, from Collins of Jupiter's lightning. Collins straightened his back and looked straight into Leyland's eyes without a hint of fear. Collins is one of the more able ones in Jupiter's lightning. He clearly wants to test Leyland's strength as a baseline comparison. Paul remarked from the side, smiling at Philip with a wineglass in hand. Collins' abilities are not comparable to Cyril's. Shall we give him a helping hand? Philip rubbed his fist, his eyes glistening with ambition. There's no need. Duke Leyland is very powerful. Do not ever underestimate him. Paul's dead fish eyes glimmered with a smile. The atmosphere inside the hall didn't seem right. All the emissaries' eyes were locked on the confrontation between the two morning stars. Since it was a celebration, Leyland and Collins did not go overboard. On the surface, it looked like they were just staring at each other in the face. However, a ruthless cross-sword fight between the spiritual domains had already unfolded unknowingly. A few minutes later, the color started to drain from Collins' confident face, and beads of sweat appeared on it. Witnessing the scene, the other magi thought they had seen a ghost. Paul and Philip exchanged glances, and both broke out in smiles. Oh! A moment later, Collins scathingly stumbled a few steps back. Although there were no differences in his expression, the imposing aura on his body had disappeared. Leyland, on the other hand, continued to sit upright. No one could tell what he had in mind. This is a present from our chief. Collins no longer dared to look Leyland in the eye as he presented the gift. Soon after, he left in haste. All the magi who witnessed this silent confrontation grew more fervent about Leyland. The revelry lasted until midnight. After receiving bountiful gifts, Leyland began conversing about his experience during his advancement. It was, in a way, his means of imparting knowledge. Many of those present were rank 3 magi after all. Leyland was forthcoming, pointing out mistakes made during the construction of the point mass, as well as other general tips. Many rank 3 magi were intoxicated by this essential information, and even some morning stars fell into deep thought. When it was time to disperse, many felt reluctant to leave. After the banquet was over, Leyland chose not to rest, and instead headed out to meet another guest in a private room. Distinguished Azure Mountain King, we meet again. Leyland smiled calmly and sat opposite the Magus. The person here was certainly the Azure Mountain King. He possessed the same appearance as his clone, with blue hair and a pair of starry eyes. He had not come to this ceremony representing Azure Mountain City, and instead snuck in on the pretense of a diplomatic mission. He felt threatened by Leyland. You can call me Zach. The Azure Mountain King spoke in a deep tone, without any further intentions of undermining Leyland. All right, distinguished Zach, let's talk about the compensation that you have to make with regards to my territory. Leyland leant back on the sofa, intertwined his hands. He was unusually relaxed. Opportunities for such extortion, where one took advantage of another's weakness, were very rare. Sure, your people, your land, and any other losses, I'll pay you for it all. I'll even pay double, as long as you promise not to leak the matter of the Stardust bugs, Zach said frankly. He only yielded to Leyland as Leyland knew his biggest secret. If this information was leaked out, the entire Oakheart clan would be faced with imminent disaster. Even his own life would be in danger. Leyland was well aware of this, but he also knew that the destruction of the Oakheart clan and the fall of the Azure Mountain King would not net him any benefits. On the other hand, such extortion had the potential for a lot of profits. As such, he didn't mind letting Zack leave, as long as he paid his due, of course. Let's not talk about the territory for the time being. You destroyed my Magus Tower. Shouldn't you compensate me with another? Leyland laughed with a hint of profoundness. Consider it done. I will build you one that is exactly the same. The Azure Mountain King replied with a rich and overbearing tone. Oh, no, I think you misunderstood something. Leyland swayed his finger. What I need is a Magus Tower that corresponds to my current status. Do you understand? What? Zack took a cold breath and immediately blurted out, impossible. This is extortion. Although Leyland's previous Magus Tower was of considerably high quality, it was only fitting for a rank 3 Magus. In the central continent, anything that catered to the Morning Star rank would cost more, especially so for the Morning Star Magus Tower. The construction cost of a Morning Star-rated Magus Tower would be at least 10 times more than that of Leyland's previous Magus Tower. Even if he were to sell his territory, it could not even cover the cost of building one level of it. Leyland's request was like a lion biting a huge chunk of meat off the Oakheart clan's body. Based on Zack's proposed bill of compensation, the Oakheart clan wouldn't suffer a huge loss. But to build a Morning Star-rated Magus Tower, even if Leyland were to decline all the other compensations, this request alone would still be outrageous. Indeed, I am extorting you. Didn't you know? Leyland mockingly laughed. Compared to the matter about the Stardust bugs and the whole Oakheart clan being erased from this world, I think it's a good deal. With the accumulated wealth of Azure Mountain City, there should be no difficulty in constructing one such Magus Tower, right? Being reprimanded by Leyland, Zack's face hardened as he gritted his teeth in anger. Fine. That's the way, Leyland smirked, obviously pleased. His expression immediately turned from one of hostility to that of friendliness, and this made Zack perplexed. Other than the Magus Tower, I have no other requests, so long as you assist me in building an astral gate. Having sensed the limits of Zack's tolerance, Leyland naturally and pursued further benefits without scruples. After all, Zack wouldn't suddenly appreciate him if he lowered his requests, so he could just as well get a hold of as many benefits as possible.